Well, let me open and welcome everybody to the webinar and give you a bit of very short background about why Bernhard and I are involved in this. Our sector, as we know, parcel and logistics, is one of the most polluting sectors, if we're honest. Large fleets, lots of emissions, energy usage, packaging, we could go on. We know all about it. And one of the things that all organizations are committed to doing is do the best they can. And you're all doing the best you can do, I'm quite sure. But that's not going to be enough if some don't, and if we don't all work collaboratively together. So from at least 10 years ago, I was starting to try and run workshops to bring together the organizations, the individual companies, the IPC, Post Europe, UPU, to see how we can work more closely together to get better solutions, exchange ideas, learn from each other. And more recently, Bernhard and I have teamed up to we ran a workshop last year in Vienna and these webinars. And at the end of this session, we'll tell you about our workshop in Spain, in Madrid, in September. But the purpose of this is really just to try and ensure that we can add value and be 1 + 1 can equal 3, which we know what the formula is. We know how synergy works. We know how we can be better together. And the challenge is even greater, of course, certainly on the environmental and climate crisis side, but wider sustainability issues we know about as well. And so our collaboration's got to be deeper and wider and stronger in terms of working together. So the purpose of this is really these webinars, our workshop, is to create a network where we can collaborate, not just for these times when we're talking together or working together, but in between as well, so we can work together to make better solutions. And we've called it Sustainability Leadership Imperative because our sector, by definition, has a huge footprint and a big impact. And so we have an imperative to show leadership with all our stakeholders, customers and suppliers. So it seems obvious, but it's not obvious to everyone. So we're trying to create the platforms, create the opportunities to have better and closer and more important kinds of collaboration together. We know there's lots of good individual initiatives, and we're not saying anything about those, but we need to do more together. So that's the background to why we're putting these webinars and workshops together. And we're talking about insetting and offsetting today, which is obviously key topics. And we're talking about a whole range of topics working together in Madrid in September. We'll tell you about at the end. But I think that's enough to give you, I hope, to give you a little bit of background about why we're here.
Great. Thank you very much, Derek. Indeed, today we are going to talk about offsetting and insetting. And I think all postal operators have quite some experience already with offsetting in one way or the other. And there are very interesting use cases and very interesting initiatives as well. Insetting is kind of still something that's in its infancy, if you want. So you see insetting initiatives as well. You see different projects, but not so many. So I think there is a lot to learn on the one hand side when it comes to offsetting. What are the right things to do? Because we all know there are also some issues and some downsides of it that have been also in the media over the recent months. And on the other side, we are talking about insetting and what could be the real advantages of having projects in that area and driving the insetting strategy in each post. So we share those insights today. We share on projects, on initiatives, on use cases. And for that, we have two speakers with us who have really a lot of experience in that area and who can talk a lot about it, but we'll limit it. Their speaking time and said, okay, you can't each talk for 2 hours. That's not the time that we have, although I think they would be easily ready to do that. We have Kathryn Battista. She's Manager Corporate Sustainability and Environmental Policy at Canada Post. And then we have Christoph Hempsch. She's Head of Sustainability, Post and Paket Deutschland from Deutsche Post DHL. And with having said that, I would suggest, Kathryn, you're already in starting position with the slides
Yeah.
on. I think you can get started. Please take the floor. Great to have you with us.
Perfect. Thanks, Bernhard. And thank you so much for inviting me to present. So as Bernhard said, my name is Kathryn Battista. I'm a manager on our corporate sustainability team at Canada Post. And today I'm here really to talk about our carbon neutral shipping program that we just launched at the end of Q1. But before I get into that, I think, it would be amiss if I didn't talk about our climate targets and our overall strategy to begin with. So we have an overarching goal that has been approved by the Science Based Target Initiative to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 across our value chain. So this is actually an absolute reduction target of 90% across our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So this is really our guiding path that we're ultimately trying to get to. I'll talk a little bit in a second about our interim targets, but some of the initiatives that we're doing to meet our interim targets are electrifying our fleet. So we've got a last mile fleet of 14,000, it's about 14,300 vehicles. And we've committed to reaching 50% electric by 2030 and 100% by 2040. So by the end of 2023, we should have about 100 vehicles on the road. As you know, there are issues with the supply chain. So as an immediate step, 100 vehicles by the end of 2023, but 50% electric by 2030. We also just opened our first net zero carbon parcel sorting facility in Toronto. So that facility can process about 1 million packages a day once it's at full capacity. It's one of the largest industrial projects in Canada. But we have many other emission reduction projects going on across our real estate network. So getting into our other science-based targets, these are them here. So I already mentioned our net zero target by 2050. But what are our interim targets to get there? So we have a 50% reduction in operational emissions by 2030. That's one of the targets that we're working towards. So that's relates to our scope 1 and 2 emissions. And then we're also working with our supply chain and subsidiaries to reduce their emissions. So as a start, we're engaging 67% of our suppliers by spend and 100% of our subsidiaries in setting science-based targets by 2025. So carbon neutral shipping, there's two main components to this. The first is really understanding what that carbon emission visibility is on an individual parcel basis. And then the second would be to offset those emissions with credible carbon offsets. So touching a little bit on the first point there, carbon emission visibility, I'll get into this more in detail later, but this was really driven by our customers. We get approximately 100 requests per quarter for emission reports from our customers. This is largely driven so that it can feed into their scope 3 inventory. But they really want to see this visibility. And we didn't have the best way of doing this prior to this year. And so we knew we had to improve our methodology for calculating this on an individual parcel basis for our customers so that it could roll up into an overall report for them. And we wanted to do this as accurately as possible. We didn't want to take the approach that we had been seeing in the marketplace, which was really that as the crow flies approach, where someone takes point A and point B on a map and draws a straight line and estimates emissions from there. We touch every single Canadian every day as we deliver our mail and parcels. So we knew that we wanted our methodology to be reflective of that milk run, so to speak, in terms of how our delivery operations work. So I'm going to touch first on that carbon emission visibility piece and our methodology behind it, and then I'll go into the carbon neutral shipping aspect of that. So the other piece to our methodology that we really thought was a must-have was to get the methodology validated by a third party. We are putting these emission reports out to our customers. We are, displaying emissions on our website. We really wanted to have that level of credibility with those calculations. And so after we were done developing the methodology, we went through the path of getting this methodology validated. So just a quick check on terms here, just as in GHG verification of your inventories, that's an audit, so to speak, that happens in the past where you're verifying past calculations. Validation is more reviewing and approving something that's happening in the future. Like all of these transactions with parcels are taking place in the future using this methodology. And so we got that validated by a third party. So getting into that methodology, it's defined over 3 unique travel legs. And it combines, which I'll get into in a second, but it combines the distance of each leg. We use real distances where we have them and averages where we don't. And then we also take into consideration the weight and dimensions of the parcel and the different types of transportation that are used along the way. So faster delivery services obviously travel by air, depending on where they're going within Canada, and slower delivery services travel by ground. So we really wanted to differentiate that in our calculations as well, since there is quite a difference in the emissions profile there. So getting into the 3 legs of travel, the first one is really that distance from induction into our network to the first depot, and then from there it travels usually to a processing plant. And again, that's depending on where it's going within Canada. But if we're thinking if it's going, say, from Toronto to Vancouver, this is the typical process that it would follow. We solve for different variables during this process. So one is the difference between, or the distance difference between a rural, urban, and remote location, and how those might differ in getting towards a depot or a plant as the next step. The second step is the largest leg of travel, which is our plant-to-plant network. So here is where it's really differentiated between ground or air travel. And then the last step is the final destination to the customer. So we solve for 3 possible destination scenarios. So the first is it's going domestically within Canada. So it would follow that similar path that I talked about in leg 1, where it's going from a major plant to a depot to that last mile delivery to the customer. The second option is that it is going to the US. So from there, we have 3 drop-off points in the US, and we solve for the distance to each of those locations. But once it reaches those locations, that ends the boundary of our shipping services, and it becomes a part of the shipping network of the U.S. Postal Service. So we consider the emissions up until that drop-off point. And then similarly, on the international side, we also account for emissions to a international destination. So in those cases, we solve for the distance from the last major processing plant to one of the international Canadian airports, and then that distance to the end destinations and the associated emissions. And then same thing on this side, the boundary ends once it lands in that destination country, and it becomes the emissions of the local post. So we solve for the emissions up until that drop-off point. So that's our methodology in a nutshell. I talked a little bit at the start about our carbon emission reports for customers. So we've translated this methodology into an online API that talks to our shipping tools, and we're able to download emission reports for customers. Eventually, we want to get this to a point where we're offering more self-serve visibility to them on dashboards. But right now, this is a snapshot of what our emission report looks like. It breaks out the volume and emissions by period as an overall total at the top. And then it also breaks it out by different service, and it lets them know what how much has been offset, because we only have certain services that are carbon neutral. And so that's the emission report in a nutshell. Switching gears now, I want to talk about our carbon neutral shipping initiative. So we just launched this in March of 2023. We are now carbon neutral, so it's embedded into the service for all of our ground domestic services. So this is our regular and expedited parcels. This is about 90% of the domestic parcels within Canada. And it translates into more than 200 million parcels per year that are delivered carbon neutral. As I already said, it's a built-in feature of the service. So it's currently offered as a no extra cost at the time of shipping right now. So what does carbon neutral shipping mean? Basically, for every ton of greenhouse gas emissions that are generated by these services, we remove 1 ton of greenhouse gas emissions from the atmosphere through the purchase of carbon offsets. So that's why that first step of understanding our emissions were a need. Because we need to know how many offsets that we need to purchase at the end of the day. And it was really important for us to align our offsets with our brand. The Indigenous people in Canada are a big priority for us in terms of inclusivity. We wanted to develop a bit of a hierarchy here in terms of the offsets that we would be willing to purchase, because as Bernhard and Derek mentioned at the beginning of this, not all offsets are treated equally. And so we really wanted to first and foremost focus on nature-based offsets as opposed to non-nature-based. So these are solutions that are happening naturally, as an example, the planting of trees or conserving forests, as opposed to non-nature-based, which maybe aren't as credible. So like electrifying cook stoves in a third world country. We wanted to make sure that we were focusing on those nature-based solutions first. We also had a hierarchy in place about where we were sourcing those from. So first and foremost, we wanted to source those from Indigenous owned or led communities within Canada. If those offsets weren't available at the time, we would go to other Canadian nature-based offset programs. And then same hierarchy in the States if that wasn't available. And then we would look internationally before we moved on to sourcing non-nature based. So luckily, there was an ample supply of these offsets in the market, and we didn't have to go far down our hierarchy. So our current offset projects are owned by a unique group of First Nations here in Canada. It's wholly owned by them, and they also don't sell these offsets to oil and gas companies. So we felt very good about our purchase and how it aligns with our brand. It's basically supporting the Great Bear Forest project. This is a project that protects forests that were previously available for logging in Canada. So it conserves and grows these existing carbon stocks. reduces emissions from harvesting, logs, road building, other forestry operations. And it's also recognized by a credible third party, so the BC Carbon Registry under the BC Forest Carbon Offset Protocol, verified by an independent third party. So we feel very good about the offset projects that we're supporting as a first initiative. We are looking to diversify, but we're still rather new in this initiative. It's only been going for the last 3 months. So that's something that we'd be looking to explore later this year. And tying it back to the beginning of this presentation, we have science-based targets. We're not allowed to use offsets to meet those targets unless we're talking about residual emissions at the end come 2050. So we really try to hit that message home with individuals, because we don't want this to be considered as a greenwashing initiative. This is something that we're doing above and beyond to offer a green service in the market. And it's not something that's meeting our emission reduction targets at the end of the day. So I just wanted to make that crystal clear. The idea here too is that because we're electrifying our fleet, the amount of carbon offsets that we purchase over time will go down as we update our methodology annually. Yeah, and then this is our track tool. So this is where customers can click on a link and track where their delivery is within Canada and when it's going to arrive. So just wanted to call out now that the customers can see that it has a carbon neutral shipping flag if it's an expedited or regular parcel, and they can click on the little information icon to find out more information about the initiative. It takes them to our website where they can learn more about sustainability at Canada Post and the carbon neutral shipping detail in person. And I don't have a slide on this, but we also have a find a rate application. So this is where customers can type in their to and from address, the dimensions of their parcel, and then they'll be able to see all the different delivery services that they have available to them. So express post priority, expedited or regular, and they're able to see the different emissions profiles of those parcel services. And this was important for us because we wanted them to see this carbon emission visibility so that they could start to make more decisions themselves around whether they want a faster service or a slower service, and have that emissions visibility there for them. There's also the carbon neutral shipping tag so that they know which services are our green services when they're going and making those decisions online. So that concludes my presentation. I think this is a little YouTube link on our like an ad that we have out right now on our carbon neutral shipping program, but maybe I can just share the slides at the end and you can go and watch that if you're interested, since I'm not sure if it'll work on my end. But thank you so much for letting me present today, and happy to take any questions if anyone has them.
Thank you very much, Kathryn. That was fascinating and very clearly explained. I'll just ask one question first, and anybody else who's got a question, please identify it and we'll come to you and we'll take your question. I'm sure Kathryn will be happy to answer. My question is about the quantification of the offsetting reduction. In other words, you're getting the bare conservation reduction, and you're talking about the number of tons of carbon reduction that's coming from that. Are they quantifying that? Is there some external validation? How are you knowing the extent of the benefits, if you like, of the offsetting?
Yeah, so they have an online registry for their carbon offsets. So they retire these offsets that we purchase publicly. So you'd be able to go on the BC Carbon Offset Registry and see that Canada Post purchased X number of offsets from the Great Bear project. And so that's all accounted for publicly.
That's trackable back to initiatives that the Great Bear Conservation Project are doing, is what I'm saying.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from anybody else? Because I'm sure people have got some queries or questions. I see one, Georgia first, shall we? And then Maria. Georgia.
Yes, thank you. Once again, a very nice presentation, also very clear. You said something about it before, but is it correct then that you do not use these offsets you don't subtract them from the total emissions of the company? It's something that you do, but which doesn't affect your overall CO2 emission reporting, right?
That's right. Yes, because so we have approved science-based targets, and you're not allowed to use carbon offsets to meet those targets. And so we want to make that just crystal clear. One, for the fact that these targets sit on a third-party website, and we've gone through the approval process, and we're this is a best practice in terms of target setting, and we want to just have that transparency. It's obviously something that we would report in terms of total number of offsets purchased in our sustainability report going forward, but it's not something that would be used to meet these targets.
Okay. And are any of your customers or your clients, I'm thinking about companies, can they use it for their emission reporting? I mean, to subtract, or is it not something, again, that they can use?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure how they're communicating that to their customers. Okay. We do have digital assets available where on their own shipping tools, they're able to see that this item was shipped carbon neutral with Canada Post. I think it all depends on what their targets are at the end of the day and how they are quantifying their own GHG inventories. But I mean, I think they certainly could use that if they don't have approved science-based targets, but I don't have visibility into what they're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kathryn. Now we'll come to Maria from Portugal.
Yes, hello. Thank you. Thank you very much also for your great presentation, Kathryn. First, I would just like to confirm regarding the carbon offsetting, if you consider all the global carbon footprint of the shipment, the scope 1, 2, and 3. It's just to confirm that, because then I have a following question, which is, do you request information from your suppliers if they also offset part of their carbon emissions? How do you do that engagement with your suppliers to know if they are also using this tool or not, and not duplicating costs eventually?
Yeah, good question. So we only consider emissions from transport, so not our facilities aren't included in this. So that does account for our scope 1 fleet emissions, and then our scope 3 purchase transport. So for that, we aren't engaging with our suppliers at all in terms of, we are engaging with them, but we aren't reaching out to them for their own carbon offsetting or anything like that. We account for their emissions from contractual agreements on distances in terms of how they ship. So we're factoring that into the methodology, but we don't necessarily get the data or any offset information from them.
Is that okay, Maria? Okay, let's just one more question then. Oliver from Austria.
Yeah, hi, thanks. One of your first slides, you said you will reduce your greenhouse gas emissions by 50% until, I guess, 2030 or 2025. From which baseline is this calculated? I mean, from which year?
The baseline is 2019.
90. Okay, thanks.
And Kathryn, I just have one more final question, then we'll move on to Christoph. My final question is, I think you showed on your customer website that, or when people are choosing the shipping, that thing, it shows carbon neutral. They don't actually have to, they don't pay more to have a carbon neutral shipping. That's built into your tariff calculations and everything else.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Because that's sometimes contentious about whether we try and pass on the charges and whether we try and get customers to pay for our cleaning up.
Yeah, exactly.
For the moment, Kathryn, thank you very much. We may come back to you in a time of discussion at the end, but now
Sure.
I'd like to introduce Christoph Hempsch, Chris Hempsch, who is the head of sustainability at Post and Paket Deutschland, Deutsche Post DHL, or is it now DHL Group? I think something like this. But anyway, you're welcome, Chris, and please tell us about insetting. We had a quite interesting discussion in Vienna last year about insetting and what it meant, and nobody was quite sure. There were some ideas, but it's sort of emerging as an important element of this. So thanks for explaining, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, it's still Deutsche Post DHL Group, but only for another 4 days or so, because from July 1st on, we're going to be DHL Group and are going to use the brand of Deutsche Post only for the letter service in Germany. But nothing else really changes. Yeah, so let's talk about sustainability. When we talk about sustainability or think about sustainability, it has not only aspects of environmental protection or environmental sustainability, but also on social and governance parts. So the classical ESG. I just wanted to introduce that because, yeah, I also feel that the environmental part is obviously discussed a lot, but the social part and the social impact that we as a postal company with 600,000 employees worldwide are having is becoming more and more important. At least in Germany, we do have a scarce labor market, and it's more and more important that our employees feel well and feel safe when working for us, and also to find prospects to work for us. So that's getting more and more important. When talking about the environmental part, we do have a climate protection program for 15 years now. It's called Go Green, and Go Green is also the name of our offsetting service that we introduced in 2008. For the first couple of years, we did have relative emission targets, so we were trying to reduce less. We wanted to reduce the emissions per shipment, and we also achieved that target ahead of time. But in 2015, with the Paris Agreement, it was clear that it's not enough to reduce emissions per shipment, but that we really have to reduce the total emissions that we are producing. And in a growing business, yeah, the emissions were still growing at that time. So since 2017, we are following the target to be net, yeah, or how do you call that in English? We want to have the net neutral target in 2050. So there are probably still going to be emissions, because not all emissions can be reduced, but those will then be compensated by taking out emissions from the atmosphere. And until then, we have a 2030 target, which is on the next slide. No, it's not. A 2030 target, and we want to reduce our emissions by about 25% until 2030, coming from 2021. And that is not only including our own scope 1 and 2 emissions, but also the scope 3 emissions that are caused by our subcontractors and transportation companies that are trucking for us. The Science Based Target Initiative has validated our targets in the last year, and yeah, so that's basically where we want to head. I have a couple of slides on what we are doing to achieve those targets. I'm going to go through that very quickly. Yeah, so first of all, we are moving parcels to our railway system in Germany, which is not that easy because distances are fairly short, and loading a train takes more than 3 hours. So we really use the train on the longest links in our network where we are not losing too much time, but the 6% is already more than 1,000 tons of CO2 that we are saving every month. Yeah, a part of that transportation, at least for post and parcel in Germany, is the biggest contributor to our emissions, and there we are using more and more biogas-powered trucks, heavy-duty trucks. We also started using battery electric trucks, heavy-duty trucks, but yeah, the availability of battery electric trucks is low so far, and also the availability of loading infrastructure, at least for the heavy-duty trucks. So therefore, we introduced biogas trucks more or less as a bridging technology. And in our buildings, we have about 3,000 operational buildings in Germany alone, and most of them are delivery depots. And whenever we are building a new one or need to leave an existing one, we are building CO2 free, or let's say the operations in there are CO2 free. So there is no gas or oil heating, but only heating powered by electricity. We are procuring green electricity and using photovoltaic to also produce electricity on site. And we are also building charging infrastructure for our delivery fleet. So far we built up more than 30,000 charging points to charge electric vehicles. And yeah, we already run 24,000 battery electric delivery vehicles out of about 60,000 delivery vehicles that we are running in total. So more than 1 out of 3 delivery vehicles is already a battery electric one. And we started that journey about 10 years ago. So there was really a long and sometimes painful way, but right now, yeah, we are very proud of that big fleet. And if you also consider the delivery districts that are run by bike or e-trike, cargo bike, then more than half of our delivery districts are running carbon-free already. Yeah, now getting to the insetting part. So as I said before, we have offsetting services for about 15 years now. And in 2021, we started offering insetting services. A bit like Kathryn explained, we started obviously with the transparency part. So we are offering carbon reports to our customers, and a lot of customers are asking us for that transparency, but also a lot or more and more customers are also asking for solutions in our network to reduce emissions caused by us for the customers' shipments. And for a long time, we tried to jointly optimize our operations, especially where we have dedicated transports or warehousing. Yeah, obviously we try to jointly improve the utilization of assets, or introducing green vehicles for dedicated lanes for our customers, especially in our freight and forwarding business. But at the same time, we are also running networks like the Post and Parcel network in Germany, where a shipment of a customer is transported by different assets every day on different lanes. So it's very hard to find dedicated solutions for a customer in a network business. And at the same time, we started to use more and more clean fuels or sustainable fuels, and also green technologies to reduce the emissions. And we were looking for solutions on how to allocate the benefit of those to the customers that are willing to pay a premium for that insetting service. And that was really the key idea behind Go Green Plus. If we now look at the concept behind it, That's an example from our global forwarding business, but in the postal sector, it's more or less the same. So if you're procuring sustainable fuel, then normally you don't have the sustainable fuel in the tank of a single vehicle, but you're normally buying blends, or you blend the sustainable fuel that you're buying into a fuel park, and then you cannot follow up on which vehicle actually got what portion of sustainable fuel in its tank. And that's getting even more complicated than with ships and airplanes. And yeah, without insetting or a book and claim mechanism where you can, as a supplier, book the benefit of the CO2 reduction, and as a customer claim this benefit of the CO2 reduction, every customer would equally benefit from the emission reduction. But at the same time, yeah, it would not be possible to find customers that are paying a premium if only a very small percentage of the reductions for their shipments are being reduced. And if you are separating the green, how do you say, the green part from the physical fuel, and keep track of that separately, and also sell that notion or characteristics separately, then only the customer who is paying for that premium is being allocated the lower emissions that you generated by introducing the green technology or the green fuel in your network. And with offsetting, we already talked about standards, and actually the basis for offsetting is quite clear, because offsetting is also explained in the greenhouse gas protocol, that offsetting cannot be used to reduce your CO2 footprint. You can report on it next to your footprint, but offsetting does not lower your footprint. And for insetting, there is no standard yet. So in the greenhouse gas protocol, you won't find the term of insetting, and also not in the currently issued ISO and the Science-Based Target Initiative as well. So it's a bit of a void currently, but as it's not, let's say, forbidden, it's also not concretely allowed. So it's actually up to the person who is creating the inventory or the CO2 balance sheet to define whether or not to use the emission reduction that is happening in the network for a single customer or not. But if you look at the development, so the greenhouse gas protocol, or the authors of the greenhouse gas protocol, they started a consultation process a couple of months ago, where not just we as a company, but also NGOs like the Smart Freight Center, the World Economic Forum, and so on, they brought forward that insetting should be, or book and claim standards should be included in the greenhouse gas protocol to motivate the decarbonization of industries that would, without insetting or book and claim, decarbonize much slower. The Science-Based Target Initiative, they already stated that they are in favor of sustainable fuels and of insetting, but that they are more or less awaiting of how the greenhouse gas protocol is going to handle it. And the ISO, as it was just issued, is probably not going to include it in the next couple of years. But and that's the positive part. The Smart Freight Center that also issued the GLEC framework that most of us are using as the basis for accounting and allocation of greenhouse gas emissions to our services and the products that we are selling. The Smart Freight Center issued a framework, an accounting framework for book and claim mechanisms in logistics just last week. Yeah, and they worked on that for about 1.5 years. And there are 4 constraints in there that will help if everybody in logistics is following that framework to make insetting offerings more comparable and also more trustworthy from the customer side. The first constraint is a modal cost constraint, meaning that you can reduce emissions for your customer only in the mode that he is actually using. So, for example, if you are transporting parcels by plane for a customer, then you cannot introduce electric vehicles to reduce the emissions coming from the plane that you are using, but you would need to use technologies in air freight. Or the same if you're using, let's say, the train to transport shipments for a customer, then you could not use a ship to reduce the emissions. So that's really important. The second constraint is much like in offsetting, the additionality. So only if there is no legal requirement to introduce a technology and only additional projects that you're doing, you can sell to the customer. So if for the last 20 years you've been using a gas truck, for example, then you could not start selling the gas truck to a customer, but only the ones that you introduce to your network. Then there is a vintage rule saying that the emission reduction that you are making possible any given year is aging, and you can use this and sell it to customers, or customer can claim this reduction only within 1 or 2 years. So that should also help, that you're not reducing emissions this year and selling the emission reduction in 10 years from now to push the emission reductions from year to year. And last but not least, the Smart Freight Center is foreseeing that you should not overcompensate. What does that mean? So if you're using a truck for a transportation service, for example, a diesel truck, and by introducing an alternative technology, you are able to reduce the emissions by, for example, 80% or 90%, then that's the reduction that you can allocate to the customer. But you can only allocate the reduction that is possible by a one-to-one exchange of the technology. So you could not use, let's say, 10 trucks reducing the emissions by 10% and allocate that emission to a customer whose shipments would only need 1 truck to be transported. That should also increase the speed at which green technologies that are reducing a lot of emissions at once are introduced into the logistics networks. And here I just pasted the web page of the Smart Freight Center so that you also find the name, and here you can download that framework for free. You just need to drop your email, and then you get the link to download the document. And I would encourage you to look into the document. And there is also on the last couple of slides an example from the postal world that the Smart Freight Center developed and asked us for input to, because in a network business like a postal network, there are some aspects that are different to classical forwarding business. For example, we are sometimes not able to track every single shipments on every single leg, especially in the mail business. So you always need to find some aggregations over a longer time to calculate the emissions per shipment. And there are some other characteristics that are a bit different, but that's probably a good starting point where we can all start from. And now only 2 more slides, coming back to our own offering, and first of all, summarizing the difference between offsetting and insetting. So while offsetting is an investment in climate protection projects that are not having a direct link to our operations, insetting are projects that are introduced in our operations and are reducing emissions in our operations. That's obviously much more expensive than offsetting, because introducing biogas trucks or battery electric vehicles into our operation is normally much more expensive than buying certificates from climate protection projects somewhere around the world. And at the same time, offsetting you can clearly not use to reduce your footprint. It's more a bandage on the wound that you were not able to close by reducing emissions. And insetting is really a solution to reduce emissions and also allocate this emission reduction to a single customer that's willing to pay the premium. And now the last slide is just showing the products that we are offering offsetting or insetting services for. So for our private customers, both for parcel and for mail communication, offsetting is included in the standard. Offsetting is also included in the standard for mail communication for business customers. It is not included in our parcel product, but actually the demand for offsetting is growing significantly over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. And the insetting for business customers, we are offering insetting services for all of our major products. So for parcel, for mail communication, and also for dialogue marketing. And for our private customers, we have 2 a bit more specific insetting offers. One of them is when you're booking a parcel label online, then the booking system is checking whether we are running a train from the origin to the destination that you just entered. And if we are running a train, we are offering you a selection button that you are okay with a longer lead time, but you're willing to reduce the emissions of that shipment by 30%, because that's roughly the emission reduction coming from moving from a diesel truck to an electricity-powered train. And if you do so, we are insetting the remaining emissions from collection and from delivery. So that's a very specific one, and we are that's at no extra cost. So you're basically swapping sustainability for lead time, and we are running that also to see whether customers are willing to sacrifice lead time over sustainability. And the second one is also very interesting. We got a recipient service that's an annual plan. So for €3.79, you can buy insetting for all the parcels that you are receiving in the course of a year. And also you're getting a sustainability status in your login at DHL, where you can see how many parcels did I receive over the last months and how many emissions did that cause. And then for only €3.79 for a whole year, you can buy that plan to inset the emissions. And we did not market that and did not run any advertisements, but already got about 35,000 customers that booked that service. So that's also quite interesting that there is a willingness to pay from the private customer end. All right, that's it. Looking forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much, Christoph. I think, I mean, you can't really better explain the way you just did it, the differences between offsetting and insetting. It's really a very, very good overview. Let me start with the first question to you. You were mentioning sustainable fuel, of course, one of the main insetting projects that you are following. Now, I assume it's not that simple. There is just a limited number of and a limited amount of sustainable fuel. So you're kind of dependent on the market very much. How do you deal with that? How do you see the future of that?
Yeah. In Germany, for our post and parcel network, it's even more complicated because there is no drop-in alternative to diesel currently. HVO, hydrated vegetable oil, would be an alternative, but that's not legally available in Germany so far. Yeah, so it's going to be legally available by next year, hopefully. But in other European countries like the UK or the Netherlands, you can buy HVO at the gas station and use it in your already existing diesel vehicle. So for our insetting projects, we need to buy new vehicles. Yeah, so electric trucks or biogas trucks, and that's also quite challenging because when we started with Go Green Plus, we did not know how big the demand would be, and it needed to be additional projects. So we had to set up a set of additional and specific projects to reduce emissions, and then start marketing Go Green Plus. And obviously now, after running it for a year in post and parcel, we see how the demand is developing and can add additional vehicles, but it takes more than a year to actually get the vehicles. And in some cases, we are also building our own charging infrastructure or fueling infrastructure, and that can take 2 years and longer if you need building permissions and so on. Yeah, so that's really something where you need to work in advance. In our forwarding business, we are using sustainable marine fuels, sustainable aviation fuels. There, the challenge is a bit different because the market is still developing. Yeah, so there are a couple of how do you call it, producers, but the production capacities are quite limited. Yeah, so there we are seeking production cooperations, where we are putting our demand on the table for the next 5 to 10 years. So the producers increase their production capacities for sustainable aviation fuels and marine fuels, and to be able to procure the volume that we actually need.
Okay, thank you very much for that. By the way, we also tried to invite Dan Smith of the Smart Freight Center to also share his views, because, as you say, I mean, this is all so much in development still, and they are very active in that area, of course. But he wasn't available today, but he said, don't worry, with Christoph, you have the right person on board who knows everything about us and what we are doing. He was so much involved in all those processes.
Yeah,
so
and actually,
great.
maybe to make some advertisement for Dan. Dan was the lead author for the framework that I just mentioned. And if you go to that webpage, Dan is also offering a webinar, I think, on Thursday on that framework. So if you're interested in that, go there, and he's probably going to explain it even better than I.
Thank you very much, Christoph. Please, I invite everybody else to ask questions, either to Christoph or also to Kathryn, whatever kind and type of question you may have. Please, who wants to go first? Maybe then from me, Christoph, to you one more question here with regards to since we talked about the sustainable fuels, there are other projects or other areas where you can start insetting initiatives as well. What would you say, or what are the things that you're focusing on now or planning to focus in the near future when you talk about insetting besides sustainable fuels?
Yeah, as Kathryn already mentioned, last mile electrification is something that we are all following. Everybody in this call probably looking at the list of attendees, because the technology is there, and it's just a question of how fast can the vehicles can be produced, and what are the incentive schemes in the countries how much more expensive or less expensive are they compared to diesel vehicles. So that's probably something. Yeah, I mean, wherever HVO, for example, is available, yeah, you can easily start an insetting, let's say, pilot, because you can start marketing the insetting offering to, yeah, a handful bigger customers. And if somebody is interested, you can procure the HVO instead of diesel. So those are probably the two things to look into if you want to be quick.
You also mentioned trains. I mean, trains, you know, in the postal history, when it comes to trains, is also very, well, not straightforward. In the past, they were used a lot, and then actually there were so many disadvantages of using trains that hardly any post followed up with that, and everything moved to the road. It seems to be changing right now, but I'm sure there are still obstacles, right? I mean, what are the biggest obstacles that actually are a barrier to shifting volumes to rail?
Reliability and cost. So the railway system is not cheaper than trucking, and the railway system, at least in Germany, is not very reliable. Yeah, so having train running late, not just a couple of minutes, but a couple of days, even happens in Germany, and that's obviously a catastrophe. So we are running trains. We started running trains on the weekend, because on Sunday there is a truck driving ban in Germany. So if the train is late, it doesn't hurt as much. We then started running trains during the week on links that are very long, and also running only a part of the volume on those links on the train, because if the train is late, we cannot risk all the parcels. So that's, I mean, we're also working very closely with the German railway system or the operators, and I mean, if I always thought that we as a postal organization are slow, because a project before it's being decided and being implemented can easily take a year or two. But in the railway system, you're talking about planning cycles of 25 years. If you want to find a new link in the network or so, and even the scheduling of the trains is done once a year, and you have to ask for a new train 9 to 10 months in advance. So that's really, really inflexible. But it's more sustainable than the truck, and that's why we are willing to take a part of the pain and also try to improve together with the railway system.
But these are your own trains, or are these cars that you simply add to already an existing train that has already a license for the specific slot?
Yeah, they are dedicated to us, but it's not our material. So it's subcontracted trains, but they are dedicated for us.
Okay, great. Questions? So I'm just inviting you, everybody here, to ask questions. I mean, we have a ton of questions, I think, so don't worry. But I just want the discussion get going. Okay, then I have a question to both of you, to Kathryn and to Christoph. And in the media, you could have seen a lot of different things about offsetting in the past. So the reputation suffered a lot. I mean, you had Friends of the Earth. They said it's a dangerous distraction from the real job at hand. You had something like phantom credits that they were talking about, in particular with regard to Vera, where it's the largest global provider of carbon offsets. So you have all those stories popping up that say kind of, they are credits, but they do not really represent genuine carbon reductions. And it's just something empty. And it's greenwashing, which you mentioned before. But so the question maybe to both of you is, offsetting is, of course, an important part of carbon neutrality on the way also to be completely carbon free, which takes, of course, some time. But it plays an important part, but how do you deal with these kind of stories that pop up and this kind of reputation, of this negative reputation and notion about offsetting? I mean, it's a challenge to deal with it, I imagine. So do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah. So for us, I mean, we're really trying to just communicate that this is something we're doing above and beyond, reducing our emissions. So we're in the marketplace. We're trying to just really hit home with that first. That our targets are aggressive. They've been approved by the Science Based Target Initiative. They're best practice in the industry. So that's what we're trying to lead with, and just saying that this is something that we're doing above all of that while we work to reduce our emissions. Still get negative pushback in the marketplace, but I think that's just because people don't understand it at the end of the day. So it's really about making the materials available and easily accessible and communicated on our website, so that hopefully we can help to change those minds.
Yeah, I think the communication aspect is very important, and what Kathryn said during her presentation, I felt was just the way how to talk about offsetting. Yeah, so a couple of years ago, offsetting was an instrument in marketing to say the product is okay, don't worry, everything is fine. Yeah, and nowadays consumers are more informed, and they expect to know, if you say it's carbon neutral, what's happening. Is it offsetting, or are you actually able to get along without emissions? If you're offsetting, how are you offsetting, and so on. So it's really important to be transparent and to be authentic about it. And I think the second aspect is the idea of offsetting is a very good idea, and I think all the experts agree on that. But it's a very shady market with a lot of shady players and a lot of bad projects. Yeah, and I mean, Vera is one of the more conservative and actually professional organizations. Yeah, but yeah, I guess if you're running offsetting, then you need to look into the projects that you are procuring credits from and make sure that they are following the highest standards, that there are control mechanisms on whether the projects are really reducing emissions the way they are claiming. And I guess that's really, really important too.
Great, thank you very much. Felix, you have a question, please.
Thanks a lot, Bernhard, and to everyone. Yes, I have a short question, and those who are in Tallinn might recall my claim that we're in this together. And in this together means as a global postal community, and we just had a UPU meeting on the whole sustainability aspect of the postal work. I'm wondering, and this is a question, of course, also to you both. We have a couple of front-running posts at the moment, and most of them are in the call, and there are a couple of others. But from the global emissions in the postal network, this covers only a part. And we have some posts in the network that are already, let's say, on a way to get there. And then we have a lot of posts, and some of them have huge emissions that are only starting their journey of sustainability. And how can we, as front-running posts, include them into the journey, incentivize them to start emissions? I mean, especially the posts in Africa have excellent opportunities for solar power. They have small carbon footprints, but they have huge potential for green energy, for example. So how can we make this whole global network approach to get everyone on board, to get a common understanding of carbon reduction, and how can we maybe even use their potential to reduce carbon emissions in our own business model and network. And as I said, question to you both.
Oh, whoever wants to go first, Kathryn, Christoph.
Sure, I can go first. Yeah, I don't know. That's a big challenge. You know, I'm not going to attempt to even solve it with my own advice, but I would just say that, you know, it certainly takes time. I wouldn't say even that Canada Post is that advanced. We're still on this journey too. All I would really add is that the need for this is crucial. Understanding your emissions is crucial, and I think it's something that is more and more going to be expected of organizations. So I would just say that if you need that kind of help and support, it seems like this is my first time joining this call, but it seems like this is the right community for that. So just to get out and learn as much as you can and reach out to people and ask them for you know, one-on-one calls and support, just to do that knowledge sharing and understand how you can be doing this, and then really try to set that priority within your organization. So that's all about starting with the top and getting that buy-in first and foremost, to make sure it's a dedicated pillar of your organization, so that you have that buy-in and needed support to kind of move forward with the investments that you're ultimately going to have to make in the business.
And Felix, I would love the postal organizations that are still on the verge of decarbonization to also find mechanisms on how to market them. Yeah, I mean, why not have African Posts run offsetting projects, for example, that other northern hemisphere postal companies can buy credits from? That, for example, would be great. And if then at the same time the existing organizations are also auditing the projects and auditing the effects, that would be also a great story to tell to our customers.
But Christoph, would this be not offsetting? This could qualify as insetting, because I mean you're investing in your supply chain in the end. So if you invest in the opportunities of other postal operators, from which you get also your volumes and with which you cooperate in both ways, wouldn't that be insetting rather than offsetting?
Yeah, I guess it depends a bit on whether there are already emissions or not. Because if there are no emissions, then you can't do insetting. And if we are really talking about African Posts, for example, where they are probably, when they are starting to increase their services and when e-commerce is hitting Africa, then the emissions are going to increase. And insetting so far, from my understanding, is not a solution to decrease the increase, but rather to reduce what's already there. So, but offsetting, there are mechanisms, and also, I mean, from insetting and offsetting the barriers, also somewhere, how far away from your own operation is it? Yeah, and I mean, if you're running a truck in Africa, then that's quite far away from my operation in Germany. Yeah, so, but there are probably other experts that can quote on that. Huh?
Bernhard, can I just
Bernhard, if I might join in, because I really like this idea, and it doesn't come as a surprise. I like this idea. Probably it's somewhere in between, I would say. For me, it makes a huge difference whether you buy, on the one extreme, a certificate that buys a tree in Malaysia in some rainforest, and on the other extreme, as Chris explained, within your own value chain, reduce or increase the sustainable fuel part in your fuel mix. And somewhere in between would be, it's within the global postal network, not directly linked to the item, but definitely closer than the tree in Malaysia. And maybe we just need to come up with a good concept over the next 2 years, because whether offsetting or insetting, at the end of the day, it's something you want to convince your customer that this is not greenwashing and not a questionable project, but something that actually reduces the footprint. And therefore, I think it's up to us to define how we call it and how we place it. And I think it can be very interesting. And Chris, to your point, I agree, especially with African posts, they have an extremely small carbon footprint, and even if they grow, as long as they don't do a house door delivery, for example, they will continue to have a small footprint. But if you go to, let's say, India or Latin America, there are posts with an already significantly huge carbon footprint that with a solar panel or some electric delivery trucks could make a huge reduction from the status quo. So I think there's a lot of room for good ideas.
Yeah, or coming from a gas-powered motorcycle to an electric motorcycle in India, that's probably not that much more expensive. But if you can sell the premium as an offsetting project to some other post or whoever, that's probably quite a good opportunity.
Bernhard, can I just ask, make
Sure,
a comment on the
absolutely.
question of Christoph?
And after you, maybe it's also Elena then also who has a question. So just
okay, Christoph, if I understood it correctly, this thing you described of people paying €3 a year, 35,000 of them, to be recipients of parcels that are more green.
Mhm.
What is interesting about that to me is, first of all, it's not very much to pay. Secondly, you got 35,000 without sounding like you were trying very hard. Now, the established idea is that people aren't prepared to pay for green solutions.
Yep.
What if we turn it on its head and we said, actually, if we give people the opportunity and we get them to pay a reasonable amount, that could help to pay for insetting, the costs of insetting solutions. So, for example, if you compare, say, with Amazon Prime, which is free delivery, you're paying, I don't know, in the UK, it's something like £60 or £70, something that's very significant compared to €3. If you had something called emission-free delivery, and you got a subscription basis for it, and you had a very significant number, that would help go a long way to helping to. Does that make sense? And is it? Do you think that's plausible? Is that something you're thinking about?
Yeah, it's absolutely plausible. I mean, we are not marketing it because we also get the feedback from the private customers that they think that it's the how do you say that it's up to the senders or the business customers to solve the problem. I mean, normally you don't even pay for the parcel service as the private recipient. But I mean the extra cost of decarbonization.
Everybody thinks that they want to pay.
Yeah,
maybe
the extra cost of decarbonization are way less than 10% of the total cost. Yeah.
Mhm.
But still, I mean, 10% additional parcel price. We all know what the business customers would say to that.
Anyway, it's worth thinking about. Sorry, Eleanor, would you like to contribute?
Yeah, thank you. Very interesting presentation. I did not have a good connection, so maybe I have lost some of the messages. But I am very much with the comments of Felix. But I think that there is no need, or of course we have to go to Latin America and Africa for that post just to try to reduce their footprint. But also in Europe, and we have also members that or postal operators that we also have to a long way forward. I would say. Well, my proposal is, Felix, I couldn't go to the UPU meeting today, but I think QSF, I think, is something that we should bear in mind in order to try to mix operational investment together with green investments. But then regarding mainly your presentation, that I thought that was very, very interesting. how was I have two questions. Is how was the process of convincing your executive level directors of going toward this strategy? And then how are you convincing customers? Because as you said now, I think as a customers, we are there is a dichotomy. Let's say we want everything green, but zero emissions, but it comes at a price. And so if you are not, I don't know if you, I couldn't understand if you are, you know, if the customers have to pay more in the presentation, it was not clear to more, because I think it's what we all should do, because it's really at a higher price. But yeah, my question is both: is how do you, because for me it was Correos is offsetting some of the footprint, and it was already very difficult for me to convince them. But I was, and I'm not very at ease with the offsetting market. I think it's not a very transparent one, and there's many things to solve there. But as you said, there is some standards, or there are some standards, while in the insetting is still very, you know, it's in the initial part, let's say, of the project. So how do you convince the team, the executive team that has really to take this into action?
You mean our executive team or the executive team of the customer?
No. In the executive team of DHL.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, first of all, we have our climate protection program for 15 years, and the idea of involving customers and selling green services has been there for 15 years, but it's always been quite hard because there was either offsetting or dedicated projects that you are running for a specific customer on a specific lane or at a specific site. And Insetting was really the breakthrough idea to offer decarbonization to customer without a direct link to their shipments, but to our network. Yeah. So, and actually in Germany, at least, the concept of green electricity is quite common and popular. Yeah. And we also try to explain that our Go Green Plus is the same for logistics as green electricity is for electricity. Yeah. Because you may not know at what time or at what point the electricity is being generated, but you know that in the course of a year, the amount of electricity that you needed was being produced green. Yeah, and here it's the same for logistics. And yeah, of course, it's not for every customer, but it's for those customers that are really interested in sustainability and that also are constantly looking for news that they can share with their customers or their stakeholders. Yeah, because once you know the best if you start a sustainability roadmap, you start measuring, then you set up targets, and then you start looking for actions. And the longer it takes you to find actions and to implement them, the more desperately you're looking for actions that you can implement. And Go Green Plus is very, very simple to use. Yeah? And we got quite a few very big customers that say that this is the first feasible way of reducing emissions in their logistics that they have found, and they're very happy to use it. Yeah? Even though the standards are not clear yet, and obviously apart from standards and using the CO2 reduction in your own balance sheet, communication towards your customers and your stakeholders is very important, yeah? Because it's also a more valuable story to tell that you, together with your postal operator, are investing into CO2 reduction in the country that you're operating in, rather than buying offsetting credits from somewhere around the world, which is also not bad, but which is just a weaker story.
Okay, but I'm going to play for the devil. Okay, wouldn't they could say that okay, you are investing is good, but anyway you will invest anyway because the regulatory pressure is so huge that you will have to invest in this transition anyway. So you are helping the company to do it maybe faster, but it's something that anyway we should do it.
My favorite question is, so you want me to pay for your decarbonization? Yeah, and my standard answer is, who else is going to pay for it? Yeah, I mean, every company can only how do you say pay with the money that's coming from the customer. Yeah, and either every customer is paying a little extra and is getting a little extra decarbonization, or a few customers are paying a premium and are also getting a premium in their decarbonization success. Yeah, so that's really the key idea behind insetting and also green electricity. Yeah. But it's true. I mean, it's not for every customer. Yeah, there are many customers that say it's a good idea, but it's too expensive. I come back later. Yeah, and there are a few customers that are very much interested in it and are also willing to pay a decent premium.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for all those explanations and also all the questions. We have just a few 3 minutes or so left, and the idea was also in those 3 minutes maybe to share a bit about our upcoming event. Just say a few words about our upcoming workshop. I'll share just 2 or 3 slides that should give you an impression. And maybe Derek, you want to explain. So I do the handwork, I share the slides, and maybe you want to say the words that come with the slides. Let's do it this way.
Okay, the workshop principle is the idea to have intensive discussions, extensive exchange of ideas. It's established format, but it gives us a chance to really process what we, instead of just the short time, the 1 hour, 1.5 hour that we've just had, over a few days to process the discussions, to work together, to collaborate, to maybe come up with some new solutions about some of these topics that we've just touched on in this very good webinar, but we can go into more depth and more detailed discussions and hopefully come up with things that people can take away and we can take forward. So let's move to the next slide. This is September in Madrid. You saw the campus. I should have described the campus in the last slide. It's just on the outskirts of Madrid. So we feel it's a nicer location, nicer venue to have more set aside discussions and relaxed discussions. It's just going in the opposite direction from the city centre, from the airport, going the other way, going out the outskirts in a campus setting. So if we go to the next one, sorry, thank you, Bernhard. You can see that we'd arrive on the 13th of September, get to know each other. It's important to build this network where people know each other. This worked very well last year in Vienna. And then we can have these scheduled discussions about the crucial topics. And you can see the topics that we've been having webinars on. We've been getting so far as we can in a webinar, but at this workshop event, we will hopefully get into much more in-depth exchange of ideas and discussions and come up with some real collaborative work. And please note also breakout sessions for postal operators only. This is Elena's suggestion as Correas are kindly hosting this workshop. There's some of the facts and the challenges that postal operators are facing is the new regulatory regimes, the taxonomy, the use cases, and for example, what Felix and Elena were talking about, joint initiatives across the postal sector. These are some things that could be a subset, because obviously not everybody will be postal operators. We hope to have suppliers, customers, private operators and others. So the breakout sessions will be in parallel, and people will be able to participate in all of them. And I think we have one more slide, do we, Bernhard? Yeah, this just explains the practical details. We think it's affordable. Please, at this moment, it'd be great if you could just confirm you're participating. And I think if you yourself can't come, it'd be great if your company, your postal operator, can be represented. So if every postal operator had at least 1 or 2 people participating, then you can get them to report back on the discussion and the learnings that are taking place, because I believe we will have lots of insights and lots of learning. So the registration's open, but we're keen to get a wider and deeper conversation going, and we want as many different organizations represented as possible. So please either consider coming yourself, or if for some reason you're unable to come, please send somebody from your organization. I think that's anything else, Bernhard?
No, I think you said everything that's important. So, I mean, just to underline once again, I think it's going to be a great event. Also, thank you very much to Elena and her team for hosting this event. And I think the location is just amazing outside of Madrid, being together for 2 days, talking, exchanging, finding joint approaches, many ideas. And I think anybody or everybody will highly benefit from this exchange. I'm quite sure about that.